The flickering neon sign of the Lucky Dragon noodle bar cast a lurid, otherworldly glow on the rain-slicked alley. Isabella, known online as Yu, huddled deeper into her oversized hoodie, the chill seeping through the thin fabric. Her phone, propped precariously on a stack of discarded noodle boxes, served as her makeshift tripod. Tonight's live stream, a desperate attempt to earn enough for next month's rent, wasn't going as planned. Only a handful of viewers lingered in her chat, their comments mostly spam and the occasional request for her to do something funny. Okay, folks, Isabella chirped, forcing a smile that felt brittle even to her. As promised, I'm braving the infamous ghost pepper noodles. Legend says if you finish the whole bowl, you'll be haunted by the spirit of old Manly himself. She brandished a pair of chopsticks, her hand trembling slightly. The bowl in front of her steamed ominously, a fiery red broth swirling around a mountain of noodles. A shadow fell across the alley entrance. Isabella glanced up, expecting to see one of the stray cats that frequented the area. Instead, a figure emerged from the darkness, tall and imposing, like a spectre stepping out of the night. He wore a long, dark coat that reached his ankles, the collar turned up high, obscuring his face in shadow. He moved with an unnerving stillness, his footsteps making no sound on the wet pavement. Isabella's carefully constructed cheerfulness crumbled. This wasn't a stray cat. This was unsettling. Her viewers noticed too. The chat exploded with comments. Oh my god, who's that? Creepy. Run. You. Isabella's heart hammered against her ribs. The man stopped a few feet away, a faint glow of the neon sign finally illuminating his face. His features were sharp and angular, almost severe, with eyes that seemed to absorb all the light around them, leaving them black and fathomless. He looked like he belonged on the cover of a gothic romance novel, not in a dingy alley behind a noodle bar. He tilted his head, his gaze fixed on her. Why are you doing this? His voice was low and resonant, a strange mixture of harshness and something else. Something that sent a shiver down Isabella's spine. Isabella swallowed, suddenly acutely aware of the absurdity of her situation. She, a struggling streamer with a penchant for spicy food challenges, confronted by a figure who looked like he'd stepped straight out of a Tim Burton film. I'm live streaming, she stammered, gesturing weakly at her phone. The man's gaze shifted to the device, his brow furrowing slightly. Live streaming, he repeated, the words sounding foreign on his tongue. He seemed genuinely confused, like he'd never encountered the concept before. I'm broadcasting myself. Eating these noodles, Isabella explained, feeling increasingly foolish. He looked back at her, his dark eyes searching her face. Why? Isabella's cheeks flushed. She wasn't sure how to explain the intricacies of her online content creation, the desperate scramble for views and subscribers, to someone who seemed so otherworldly. It's my job, she managed, the words sounding inadequate even to her own ears. Your job is to eat spicy noodles. He sounded incredulous. Well, not just that, Isabella said defensively. I also do other things, like talk to people and play games. He remained silent for a long moment, studying her with an unnerving intensity. The silence stretched, punctuated only by the gentle patter of rain and the distant hum of traffic. Isabella shifted uneasily under his gaze, feeling like a specimen under a microscope. Finally, he spoke, his voice barely above a whisper. You are fascinating, Isabella blinked, taken aback. Fascinating. That wasn't the reaction she usually got from strangers, especially ones who looked like they'd just emerged from a graveyard. He took a step closer, and Isabella involuntarily held her breath. He was so close now that she could see the faintest shimmer in his eyes, like starlight reflected in a dark pool. He reached out a hand, his fingers brushing against her cheek. His touch was surprisingly gentle, sending a jolt of electricity through her body. I must learn more, he murmured, his voice laced with something that sounded almost like longing. Isabella stared at him, her mind reeling. Who was this man, and why did his touch feel so familiar? Like a memory she couldn't quite grasp. The sound of sirens in the distance broke the spell. The man's head snapped up, his eyes narrowing. He looked back at Isabella, his expression suddenly urgent. "I must go," he said, his voice low and tense. "But I will return." And with that, he turned and vanished back into the darkness, leaving Isabella standing alone in the rain-slicked alley, the half-eaten bowl of ghost pepper noodles forgotten at her feet. Her phone screen displayed a flurry of frantic messages from her viewers, all asking the same question. Who was there? But Isabella had no answers. She only knew one thing for sure. Her life, already precarious, was about to get a whole lot more complicated. The flickering neon sign of the ramen stall across the street cast a sickly green glow on Yu's apartment door. The peeling paint, the same depressing shade of beige as the hallway carpet, seemed to absorb the light, leaving the space perpetually shrouded in a film of grime and despair. Inside, Yu, still in her faded unicorn onesie, frantically searched for her phone, the frantic beeping of her doorbell echoing in the small, cluttered apartment. She'd known this was coming. The calls had been relentless, each one a hammer blow to her already fragile composure. She peeked through the peephole. Two hulking figures, their faces obscured by the shadows of their baseball caps, stood on her doorstep. Their presence radiated a menacing aura that seeped through the thin wood, raising the hairs on the back of her neck. One of them pounded on the door again, the sound resonating through her bones. "Miss Yu," a gruff voice bellowed. "We know you're in there." Yu's heart hammered against her ribs. Her meager earnings from streaming barely covered her rent, let alone the mounting debt she'd inherited from her father. These were the debt collectors, the wolves she'd been desperately trying to outrun. She glanced around the apartment, her gaze landing on Julian's jacket, the strange, otherworldly fabric shimmering subtly in the dim light. He was out, again, on one of his mysterious errands, his pale face and haunted eyes flashing before her. He'd promised to help. But how could an alien, a being slowly disintegrating from being in her proximity, possibly solve this very earthly problem? The pounding on the door intensified, rattling the cheap picture frames on the wall. One, a photo of her and her father at the beach, fell to the floor with a sickening crack. Tears welled in her eyes. This was it. The culmination of all her bad decisions. The weight of her father's legacy crushing her. "Open up, Ms. Yu, or we'll be forced to take further action. Further action." The words hung in the air, heavy with unspoken threats. Yu's breath hitched in her throat. She had to do something, anything. Taking a deep breath, she plastered on a brave, albeit shaky, smile and opened the door. The two men, their faces now illuminated by the harsh hallway light, loomed over her. They were even bigger and more intimidating up close, their expressions hard and unforgiving. One of them, a man with a thick scar bisecting his left eyebrow, held a clipboard. "Ms. Yu," he said, his voice flat and devoid of emotion. "We're here about your outstanding debt." Yu's voice trembled. "I can't pay right now. I'm waiting for a large sum of money." The lie tasted like ash in her mouth. The men exchanged a knowing glance. "We've heard that one before," Scarface said, a hint of amusement in his tone. "Look, we don't enjoy doing this, but we have a job to do. If you can't pay, we'll have to seize your belongings." He gestured towards her apartment, his eyes scanning the meager furnishings. Yu felt the wave of nausea wash over her. Everything she owned, the few precious reminders of her past, were about to be taken away. "Please," she pleaded, her voice cracking, "give me a little more time. I promise I'll get the money." Scarface sighed dramatically. "We've already given you enough time, Ms. Yu. We're not the charity." He stepped past her, his heavy boots thudding on the worn floorboards. The other man followed, his eyes sweeping over her possessions with predatory interest. Yi watched helplessly as they began cataloging her belongings, their callous indifference a physical blow. Her laptop, the lifeline of her streaming career, her father's old guitar. The only thing left of him that truly mattered, even her threadbare unicorn onesie. Each item meticulously listed on the clipboard, each entry another chip away at her dignity. Panic clawed at her throat. She had to stop them. But how? She was one small woman against two imposing men. A wave of despair washed over her, threatening to drown her. This was it, the end of everything. Suddenly, a cold, ethereal breeze swept through the apartment, causing the flickering fluorescent light overhead to buzz erratically. The two men stopped, their heads snapping up, a look of confusion etched on their faces. Yu felt a strange tingling sensation on her skin, a familiar premonition of Julian's arrival. The air crackled with an unseen energy. A shimmer, like heat rising from asphalt, distorted the space behind the men, and then he was there. Julian materialized as if from thin air, his pale face even more drawn than usual, his dark eyes glowing with an otherworldly light. He didn't speak, but his presence filled the room, an aura of power emanating from him that sent a shiver down Yu's spine. The two debt collectors, their bravado instantly evaporated, stared at him, their mouths agape. Scarface stammered, Who are you?" Julian's gaze, cold and piercing, fixed on the men. A low hum resonated from him, a sound that seemed to vibrate in the very bones of the apartment. He raised a hand, his long, slender fingers outstretched towards them. The air around him shimmered and distorted, as if reality itself were bending to his will. And then, he spoke, his voice a low, resonant whisper that echoed with an unsettling power. "Leave." The air in Isabella's tiny apartment crackled with a strange energy, a blend of fear and a fragile, burgeoning hope. Rain lashed against the single window, mirroring the tempest brewing within her. Julian sat on her worn sofa, a stark contrast to its threadbare fabric. He looked utterly out of place, like a fallen god amidst the clutter of her human existence. His usual ethereal glow seemed dimmed, his features etched with an exhaustion that transcended the physical. Scattered around them were the extravagant gifts, the designer clothes, the jewelry, the very laptop she used to stream, that had arrived anonymously over the past few weeks, fueling rumors and whispers amongst her meager online following. "You sent these." Isabella gestured at the opulence surrounding them, a voice barely a whisper. The ridiculousness of it all threatened to shatter the fragile understanding she had begun to develop with this otherworldly being who had entered her life like a storm. Julian nodded, his silver eyes holding hers with an intensity that both thrilled and terrified her. "I wanted to ease your burden." His voice, usually melodic and resonant, sounded strained, as if each word cost him a great effort. A wave of shame washed over Isabella. She had been so quick to accept the gifts, to revel in the momentary escape from the relentless pressure of her debt and her failing career as a streamer. The truth, stark and unforgiving, hit her with the force of a physical blow. He was dying. Dying because of her. Dr. Lin's words echoed in her mind. Prolonged exposure, cellular degradation fatal. "You shouldn't have," she choked out, her throat constricting with emotion. "You're re-hurting yourself for me." A faint, sad smile touched Julian's lips. "It's a small price to pay," he murmured, his gaze drifting to the rain-streaked window. "To see you smile." The confession hung heavy in the air, thick with unspoken emotion. Isabella's heart ached with a mixture of love and guilt. She knew, deep down, that she was falling for him, for this strange, beautiful being who was sacrificing himself for her. But the knowledge of his sacrifice made her love feel like a poison, a beautiful, deadly bloom. She stood abruptly, the sudden movement sending a pang of dizziness through her. She grabbed the expensive laptop, its sleek surface cold against her trembling hands. "I can't accept these," she said, her voice firmer now, strengthened by a surge of resolve. "I can't, won't let you do this to yourself." Julian watched her, his expression unreadable. He made no move to stop her as she began gathering the other gifts, piling them haphazardly onto the small table near the door. The jewelry, which had seemed so dazzling a few moments ago, now felt like weights dragging her down. "Isabella," Julian began, his voice a low, pleading murmur. "No, Julian," she interrupted, her voice trembling but resolute. "I know you mean well, but this isn't right. I can't let you destroy yourself for me. I have to do this myself." Tears streamed down her face, blurring her vision. She fumbled with the clasp of a diamond necklace, her fingers clumsy with emotion. The necklace slipped from her grasp and clattered to the floor. Julian reached for it, but she stopped him, her hand covering his. His skin felt cool, almost icy, against hers. "Please," she whispered, her voice choked with sobs. "Just let me do this." He looked at her, his silver eyes filled with an unfathomable sadness. He slowly withdrew his hand, his touch lingering like a phantom sensation on her skin. The silence that followed was broken only by the relentless drumming of the rain. Isabella continued gathering the gifts, her heart heavy with each item she picked up. The designer clothes felt like costumes, disguising the reality of her situation. The jewelry felt like shackles, binding her to a debt she couldn't repay. Finally, she had gathered everything. The small apartment, stripped of its temporary finery, felt bleak and bare, but it was hers, her struggle, her burden, and she would face it, alone if she had to. She looked at Julian, her eyes brimming with tears. "I'll return these," she said, her voice barely a whisper, "and then I'll pay you back every penny." He didn't respond, just watched her with a look of profound sorrow. The rain continued to lash against the window, a relentless backdrop to the quiet tragedy unfolding within the tiny apartment. Isabella turned and walked towards the door, the pile of gifts heavy in her arms. As she reached for the doorknob, she paused, a hand hovering over the cold metal. She couldn't leave him like this, not with that look in his eyes. She turned back to face him, her heart aching with a love that felt both exhilarating and devastating. "Julian," she whispered, her voice trembling with emotion, "I don't want you to go." He looked at her, his silver eyes widening slightly. A flicker of hope, fragile and tentative, ignited within their depths. He opened his mouth to speak, but no words came out. Instead, he reached out and took her hand, his touch sending a shiver down her spine. His hand, once cool and distant, now felt warm, almost feverish. He pulled her towards him, and she fell into his embrace, the weight of the gifts tumbling to the floor. She clung to him, burying her face in his chest, the scent of rain and something else, something uniquely him, filling her senses. For a moment, the world outside ceased to exist. There was only him, his warmth, his touch, the silent promise of a love that defied logic and reason. The rain continued to fall, washing away the pretense, the fear, the doubt, leaving only the raw, vulnerable truth of their connection. The fluorescent lights of the conference room hummed, casting a sickly yellow glow on the polished mahogany table. Isabella, or Yu as she was known online, sat rigidly, her fingers tracing the rim of a lukewarm coffee cup. Across from her, Mr. Park, her company's CEO, beamed, a predatory glint in his eyes. Flanking him were two other executives, their expressions a mixture of feigned enthusiasm and barely concealed impatience. The air crackled with a tension Isabella hadn't registered until this very moment. This wasn't the celebratory meeting she'd been promised. "You, my dear, Mr. Park began, his voice oozing with false sincerity. "Your numbers are through the roof." The Reaper incident, as unfortunate as it was, has catapulted you into online stardom. You're a phenomenon. Isabella managed a tight smile. The Reaper incident, as he so casually put it, referred to the series of bizarre occurrences surrounding Julian, the mysterious man who'd entered her life like a whirlwind of shadows and secrets. She'd initially feared him, mistaking him for a debt collector with a penchant to the dramatic, until she'd discovered the truth. Julian was an alien, slowly dying from the very act of loving her. Their bond, forged in the midst of chaos and fear, had blossomed into something precious, something she guarded fiercely. "We're so proud to have you on our team," another executive chimed in, his words as empty as the promises they'd made before. "Which is why," Mr. Park continued, his smile widening, "we've decided to capitalize on this momentum." He slid a folder across the table. Isabella's heart sank as she saw the mock-ups. Her face, plastered on energy drinks, phone cases, even a line of Reaper-themed clothing. A cartoonish, ghoulish figure, a grotesque parody of Julian, leered from each item. "Mr. Park," Isabella began, her voice trembling slightly, "we never discuss merchandising. And certainly nothing like this. You, darling." Mr. Park chuckled, waving a dismissive hand. "Think of the exposure. The revenue. You'll be a household name." A wave of nausea washed over Isabella. They were exploiting her, using Julian's suffering, his very existence, as a marketing gimmick. The memory of Julian's pained whisper, his confession of his dwindling life force with every touch, every shared breath, echoed in her mind. They were turning his love, their shared secret, into a cheap joke. "This isn't what I signed up for," Isabella said, her voice gaining strength. The earlier nervous tremor had given way to a steely resolve. Now, you, Mr. Park's tone shifted, the veneer of geniality cracking. "Let's be realistic. Your contract gives us full rights to your image. You're lucky we're even offering you a cut of the profits." "Profit?" Isabella's voice rose, laced with disbelief. "You're profiting off of someone's pain, someone's life." The executives exchanged uneasy glances. Mr. Park's smile vanished completely. "You're being dramatic, you. It's just a bit of fun. The public loves this kind of thing. They'll eat it up." Isabella slammed her hand on the table, the sound echoing in the tense silence. "This isn't fun. This is exploitation. I won't be a part of it." "You don't have a choice," Mr. Park hissed, his eyes narrowed. "You signed a contract. You'll do as we say." Isabella stood up, her chair scraping against the floor. "I won't." She picked up the folder, her fingers tightening around the glossy pages. With a swift, decisive movement, she tore the mock-ups in half, then again and again, until they were nothing but confetti. She let the shredded pieces flutter to the table, a silent declaration of defiance. "You'll regret this," Mr. Park spat, his face contorted with rage. Isabella met his gaze unflinchingly. "I doubt that." She turned and walked out of the conference room, a humming fluorescence casting long shadows behind her. As she stepped into the elevator, a wave of exhaustion washed over her. She had defied them, but at what cost? Her career, her livelihood. But as she thought of Julian, his gentle touch, the quiet strength in his eyes, a new resolve solidified within her. She would not betray him. She would not let them turn his love, their love, into a commodity. She would fight. She had to. The elevator doors closed, leaving the stunned executives and the scattered remnants of their exploitative scheme behind. As Isabella descended, the city lights blurred through the glass, a kaleidoscope of possibilities. A future uncertain, but now undeniably her own. She would find a way. For Julian, for herself, for their love. She would find a way. The flickering neon sign of the Lucky Dragon takeaway cast a lurid, green glow over the alleyway, illuminating the makeshift infirmary Isabella had created for Julian. Discarded cardboard boxes flattened into mats lined the grimy concrete. A threadbare blanket, pilfered from a nearby charity shop, lay draped over Julian. His face, usually etched with a stoic weariness, was now pallid, almost translucent. He was fading, the vibrant alien energy that had once crackled beneath his skin now a mere flicker. The debt collectors, his reapers as he'd called them, hadn't been seen since the last terrifying encounter. But the damage was done. Julian was dying, and Isabella knew, with a bone-deep certainty, that she was the cause. "It's the paradox, you," he'd whispered, his voice thin as cobwebs. "My kind. We draw sustenance from solitude. Connection. Especially this kind, it consumes us. Connection." It was a word that resonated with Isabella, echoing the loneliness she'd felt before he stumbled into her life. Her small streaming room, a digital island in a vast, indifferent ocean. She'd called him a grim reaper at first. His dark clothes, his somber silence, all feeding into the persona. That now, as she looked at him, so fragile, so close to disappearing, she saw only vulnerability, a desperate plea for help reflected in his fading eyes. He'd revealed everything to her. His true form, shimmering with otherworldly light, the spaceships hidden amongst the clouds, the silent invasion already underway. He'd confessed his love, a love as alien and inexplicable as he was, a love that was killing him. And she, in turn, had confessed her own burgeoning feelings, the absurd, illogical affection for this strange, dying being. He was her grim reaper, but also her unexpected savior, rescuing her not from death, but from a life lived in muted grayscale. "There has to be a way," she murmured, pushing a stray strand of hair from his forehead. The skin beneath her touch was cool, clammy. Time was running out. He offered a weak smile. "There isn't you. It's the natural order. We are ephemeral. Our existence a transient ripple in the cosmic fabric." His words hung in the stale alley air, heavy with finality. But Isabella refused to accept them. She thought back to their first encounter, him standing outside her apartment building, a silent observer in the bustling city. He'd been drawn to her, he'd said, her energy, her vibrancy, a beacon in the human nose. And now, that same vibrancy was extinguishing him. A sudden, reckless thought sparked in her mind. It was a desperate gamble, driven by an instinct deeper than logic, an instinct born of the strange, symbiotic bond they'd forged. What if she began, her voice trembling with a mixture of fear and hope? What if the connection called Al-Sahil? His eyes widened slightly, a flicker of confusion in their depths. He didn't understand. She didn't fully understand it herself. But the idea, once formed, wouldn't let go. She leaned closer, her breath catching in her throat. The neon green light reflected in his darkening eyes, giving them an eerie luminescence. "If it consumes you, then I'll give you more." Before he could speak, before he could protest, she closed the distance between them. Her lips met his, a tentative touch at first, then deepening into a kiss fueled by desperation and an unyielding, illogical hope. It wasn't a kiss of passion, not in the traditional sense, but a transfer of energy, a pouring out of her life force into his dwindling reserves. The alley held its breath. The only sound was the distant hum of the city, a low thrumming backdrop to this strange, intimate ritual. For a moment, nothing changed. Julian remained still, his eyes closed, his breathing shallow. Isabella's heart hammered against her ribs, fear clawing at her throat. Had she been wrong? Was this the end, then? A tremor ran through Julian's body. A soft, ethereal glow emanated from his skin, pushing back the pallor, replacing it with a warm, golden light. His eyes fluttered open, and the dullness was gone, replaced by vibrant, almost incandescent intensity. He looked at her, his gaze filled with wonder and something akin to awe. He reached up, his hand trembling, and gently cupped her face. The touch, no longer cold and clammy, was warm, alive. He breathed deeply, the air filling his lungs with a sound that echoed the revitalization of a dying world. You, he whispered, his voice stronger now, infused with a newfound energy. You saved me. A tear traced a path down Isabella's cheek, a mixture of relief and disbelief washing over her. She had done it. She had defied the natural order, rewriting the rules of their strange, interspecies connection. He sat up, pulling her into a gentle embrace. You don't understand what you've done, he murmured against her hair. You've not just saved Maeve and locked something. He pulled back slightly, his eyes shining with an intensity that both thrilled and frightened her. I can show you now. My true form. The real me. The air around him shimmered, the neon green light of the alley twisting and distorting. His human guise began to melt away, revealing the being beneath. It wasn't the shimmering, ethereal form she'd glimpsed before, but something more. Something powerful, ancient, and undeniably alien. His skin shimmered with a constellation of colors, his eyes glowed with a cosmic light. And from his back, to vast, iridescent wings unfurled, stretching out to fill the narrow confines of the alley. He was beautiful, terrifying, and utterly, undeniably real. The rooftop shimmered under a blanket of freshly fallen snow. City lights blurred below, a hazy, glittering ocean. You, bundled in a thick, oversized coat, a breath clouding the air, stood inches from Julian, his familiar dark silhouette a stark contrast against the pristine white. He wasn't his usual Grim Reaper persona, the shadows clinging to him less intensely tonight. He seemed lighter, almost translucent. He looked at her, the faintest trace of a smile touching his lips. It was the warmest expression she'd ever seen on his face. Tonight, he wasn't the aloof, enigmatic alien she'd first met. Tonight, he was just Julian. You reached out, a gloved hand hesitantly tracing the line of his jaw. He didn't flinch. Instead, he closed his eyes, a soft sigh escaping his lips. The touch, a simple gesture, resonated with an intensity that surprised them both. It was the culmination of weeks of unspoken emotions, of shared fears and fleeting moments of joy. I'm so glad I met you, Julian, she whispered, a voice thick with emotion. The words hung in the frosty air, heavy with unspoken feelings. He opened his eyes, the usual melancholic depth shimmering with an unfamiliar light. He captured her hand in his touch surprisingly warm against her cold glove. And you. His voice, usually a low rumble, was softer than the falling snow. More than you can possibly know. A wave of warmth spread through you, chasing away the chill. The alien, the Grim Reaper, the mysterious stranger, was looking at her with an intensity that made her heart ache. It was a look filled with love, with longing, and with a deep, unspoken sadness. They stood in silence, the bustling city sounds muted by the thick blanket of snow. The only sound was their shared breaths and the frantic beating of Yu's heart. This moment, suspended in time, was more precious than any of the chaotic, bizarre weeks that had led them here. You saved me, Yu said softly, remembering the relentless debt collectors, the strange occurrences, the growing fear that had consumed her life before he'd appeared. You came into my life when it was nothing but a mess, and she searched for the right words. You brought light. Julian chuckled, a low, rumbling sound that reverberated through the stillness. Light fades, everything fades. His words, though tinged with melancholy, held a strange comfort. It was the truth, raw and unfiltered, and it was coming from a being who seemed to understand the transient nature of existence more than anyone else. She squeezed his hand, unwilling to let the sadness consume them. Not everything, she insisted, her gaze holding his. Not us, not this. He met her gaze. His eyes filled with an emotion she couldn't quite decipher. You, he began, his voice laced with a newfound urgency. There's something I need to tell you, something I should have told you a long time ago. He paused, drawing a deep breath. The faint luminescence that always surrounded him pulsed, brighter now, almost blinding. I'm not supposed to be here. Not like this. He gestured vaguely at the cityscape below. My being here, with you. It's killing me. Yu's breath hitched. She knew, somehow, that he wasn't speaking metaphorically. She'd seen the subtle changes in him, the increasing translucence, the growing weariness. What do you mean? She whispered, her voice trembling. He took another step closer, his form shimmering, almost flickering in the dim light. My energy, my life force, it's tied to this planet in a way I didn't anticipate. Being near you, connecting with you, it's disrupting the balance. I'm fading, you. Going back to wherever I came from. Tears welled up in Yu's eyes, blurring the city lights. She shook her head, refusing to believe it. No, she whispered. There has to be a way, something we can do. He cupped her face in his hands, his touch gentle, almost ethereal. There isn't, you. But he hesitated, his eyes searching hers. Being here with you these past weeks, it's been worth it. It's been more real than anything I've ever experienced. He leaned in, his forehead touching hers. I love you, you, he whispered, his voice barely audible above the wind. I love you, little streamer. And that, in itself, is a miracle. A single tear traced a path down Yu's cheek. She closed her eyes, leaning into his touch, savoring the warmth, the closeness, knowing it was fleeting. She didn't want to let go. She couldn't. I love you too, Julian, she whispered back, her voice choked with emotion. He pulled back slightly, his eyes shining with an almost unbearable intensity. Then, slowly, his form began to shimmer, to dissolve. The luminescence that surrounded him intensify, blindingly bright. He smiled, a genuine, heartbreaking smile, and then, with a final, soft sigh, he was gone. The rooftop was silent again, the snow falling steadily. The city lights twinkled below, indifferent to the loss that had just unfolded. Yi stood alone, the cold seeping into her bones, her heart aching with a pain so profound she thought it would shatter her. She lifted her hand, touching the spot where he'd stood, still feeling the ghost of his warmth. Then, she noticed something. A single, shimmering snowflake rested on her glove. It pulsed with a faint, ethereal light. As she watched, the snowflake began to morph, to shift, to take shape, and within seconds, a miniature version of Julian, no bigger than her thumb, stood on her glove, his familiar melancholic eyes fixed on her. He smiled, a mischievous glint in his eye. Turns out, he said, his voice tiny but clear, fading isn't quite the same as disappearing. Besides, he added, a playful smirk touching his lips, who's going to protect you from rogue space debris now? The rooftop shimmered under a lavender twilight, city lights twinkling below like a spilled box of glitter. Yi stood at the edge, the wind whipping her hair around her face, the scent of ozone sharp in the air. Her live stream equipment lay abandoned nearby, the screen of her phone still displaying the frantic messages from her followers. They wouldn't understand. Nobody could. Not really. She wasn't even sure she did. Entirely. But one thing was clear. She was in love with a dying alien who looked suspiciously like a grim reaper. He materialized beside her, silent as always, his dark form a stark contrast against the pastel sky. Julian, the name still felt foreign on her tongue, a whispered secret shared between them in the hushed hours. His pale face, framed by inky black hair, held an ethereal beauty, like a porcelain doll crafted in the moonlight. The dark circles beneath his eyes, a constant reminder of his fading energy, were deeper tonight. They mirrored the ache in her own chest. Julian, she began, a voice, a shaky breath against the wind. He turned his head, his obsidian eyes locking onto hers. In their depths, she saw a universe of sorrow, a galaxy of longing. He didn't speak, couldn't speak, not in the way humans did, but he listened. He always listened. I don't know how to say this, she stumbled, clutching her arms around herself. She'd rehearsed this speech 1,000,000 times in her head, each iteration more melodramatic than the last. But now, facing him, the carefully crafted words felt hollow, inadequate. Ever since you appeared, everything's been different. A faint flicker, a spark of something akin to emotion, crossed his features. It was gone so quickly she almost doubted she'd seen it. But it was there. Hope, maybe. The debt collectors. The weird happenings. The exploding toaster ovens. She chuckled, a nervous tremor in her voice. It's been chaotic, terrifying, but also she paused, taking a deep breath of the crisp night air. Also amazing. He tilted his head, a silent question in his gaze. He reached out, his hand hovering just inches from her arm. He hesitated, as if afraid to touch her, afraid of the damage his presence inflicted. Julian, she whispered, her voice thick with unused tears. I know about the energy drain. I know being near me hurts you. He closed his eyes, a flicker of pain crossing his features. He drew back his hand, the movement small but laden with meaning. He was protecting her. Even now, even as he faded away. But I don't care, she continued, her voice growing stronger, firmer. I don't care if it hurts you. Being with you, even with all the craziness, it's worth it. She stepped closer, bridging the gap he had created. She laid her hand on his arm, feeling the cool, almost ethereal texture of his skin beneath her fingertips. He flinched, a low groan escaping his lips. It was a sound of pain. Yes, but also something else, longing, desire. I love you, Julian, she confessed, the words tumbling out in a rush. I know it's crazy, I know it's probably doomed, but I love you. He opened his eyes, his gaze locking onto hers with an intensity that made her breath catch in her throat. The sorrow was still there, but it was overlaid with something new, something vibrant, hope, love. He raised his hand, his fingers tracing the curve of her cheek. The touch was feather-light, almost imperceptible, but it sent a jolt of electricity through her entire body. He leaned in, slowly, hesitantly, as if asking permission. She closed her eyes, her heart pounding in her chest. She could feel his breath on her skin, cool and faintly sweet, like the scent of distant stars. And then, his lips brushed against hers. It wasn't a fiery, passionate kiss. It was soft, gentle, almost reverent. It was the kiss of a dying man, giving the last of his energy to the woman he loved. But it was also the kiss of an alien, a being from another world, sharing a connection that transcended language, that defied logic. The kiss deepened, a silent conversation between two souls. She could feel the energy flowing between them, a swirling vortex of emotions. She could feel him fading, slipping away. But she clung to him, desperate to hold on to the moment, to the feeling. And then, as suddenly as it began, the kiss ended. He pulled away, his eyes filled with a sadness so profound it made her chest ache. He was fading, faster now, his form becoming translucent, shimmering like a mirage. But as he faded, something incredible happened. The dark circles beneath his eyes began to recede. The lines of exhaustion on his face smoothed out. His form solidifying, becoming more vibrant, more alive. He looked at her, a genuine smile gracing his lips for the first time. He reached out, taking her hand in his. This time, There was no hesitation, no fear. The touch was warm, solid, human. I love you too, Yu, he whispered, his voice clear and strong. And I think I'm going to live. The city lights twinkle below, reflecting in his obsidian eyes, which now held not sorrow, but a universe of love. The lavender twilight deepened into a velvety night, promising a future filled with possibilities, a future they would face together.